Okay, we're going to call the meeting to order now at 6:01 p.m. This is the regular meeting with closed session for District 158. Okay, and let's have a, I'm sorry, I can't see this. Roll call, please. Yeah.
Mrs. Melendi?
Here.
Mr. Gentry?
Here.
Mr. Drizel? Mr. Guerin?
Here.
Mr. Troy?
Here.
Mr. Fleck?
Here.
Mr. Quagliano?
Here. Okay, we have a quorum, so I will make a motion to go into closed session for the items listed in the agenda, including plus collective bargaining matters.
Is there a second?
Is there a second?
I did.
Okay, Mr. Troy. Okay, we'll have a roll call on this.
Mr. Gentry?
Yes.
Mr. Guerin?
Yes.
Mr. Troy?
Yes.
Mr. Quagliano?
Yes.
Mrs. Melendi?
Yes.
Mr. Drizel? Mr. Fleck?
Yes, the motion carries. We are in closed session as of 6:02 p.m.
Okay, we're back in open session at 7 o'clock. Can I have roll call, please?
Mr. Fleck,
Here.
Mr. Guerin, Mr. Gentry,
Here.
Mrs. Melendi, Mr. Quagliano, Mr. Drizel,
I'm here.
Mr. Troy.
Here.
Okay. We are back, as I said, in open session, nothing out of closed session. So if we could all please rise for Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. My, that was efficient. All right, public comment. No public comment. All right. Okay, Mr. Orry, do you have a report?
No, sorry, no.
Okay, Ms. Lombard. Dr. Schlichter. Okay. Mr. Zaire. Mr. Altmeyer. Mr. Berkey. I'm going to keep mine. All right, so I'd like to make a motion to adopt the agenda with the removal of items 7, 8, 10, and 11. Second. We have a second from Mr. Quagliano. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Okay, that takes us on to Dr. Schlichter's report.
Thank you. I just wanted to give an update about something, and I communicated with the board. At our last meeting at the Committee of the Whole, we were looking at the strategic plan, and we had some discussion about adding an early elementary literacy target. So what we were really looking at as we were thinking about it internally is through the literacy review, if you recall, we had an implementation plan that really focuses for this year on a concept called word study. So word study focuses on decoding, which is being able to read the word, and gaining sight words. And the way that that's assessed for kids is how many words per minute can they read correctly. And so that's a measure of what's called oral reading fluency. And so that's what we use, and we have those measures already. It makes a lot of sense because that really has been our first targeted piece of literacy for elementary that we're implementing this year. Following year, we'll add in reading workshop. Following year, we'll add in writer's workshop, and that sort of all came out of the review. So to me, it really made a lot of sense for us to align our early elementary literacy targets for this year with that word study concept, since that was part of our implementation anyway. So the way that the targets look, they do look, I think, probably a little bit different and more technical than maybe what we're used to seeing because we're using a different measure. So AIMSweb is a test that we benchmark with 3 times a year. We use it to measure growth, but we also use it to identify students for intervention. So we have a fall, a winter, and a spring benchmarking. So we will very easily be able to do just a straight shot, same students in the fall, same students in the spring, and measure flat growth through the year. So it's not anything technical or statistical model or anything like that. The way that the targets were written, and we really did look at several different ways to do it, percentage meeting a benchmark, things like that, but really what seemed the most straightforward and meaningful is just to look at what is the increase in gain of words per minute read correctly by a student, because that truly is what word study is focused on. So already we exceed the national mean for words per minute, actually quite extensively. So what we're looking at is just adding that figure of 1. So adding, if we exceeded by 6.5 this past year, then we'll exceed by 7.5 for next year. So that's not a percentage. All it is just an average words per minute read by our students correctly. So again, it's a pretty straightforward concept. The target looks a little bit wordier maybe or more technical, and again, it's using a measure we don't typically write for targets. But I think it will be a very meaningful early elementary literacy measure. And what I really like is that it's perfectly aligned with what we've said is our first area of focus for implementation. So wanted to just propose those. What you have at your place is a revised version of the proposed strategic plan. So it's different than the one that's in consent, and it just has those 2 measures added in, 1 for first grade, 1 for second grade. The reason that we had to do those separately is because there was no valid way that we could combine them. And really what you normally see is first grade is a much higher gain of words per minute. First grade's when they're like sponge is gaining the words. Second grade, it slows down a little bit. By the time we're adults, we're not gaining a whole bunch of new words per minute. And that's kind of how you think of reading development. But we really did, again, struggle with, should we try to combine it into one? I think it's really more valid for accountability and true measurement to keep it as two. So we propose to add those two targets in, one for first grade, one for second grade, based on our prior year data. So with that, we can have any discussion or any questions that you have.
Or you want to just keep it for, we can remove it from consent agenda, and then we can discuss it at that point, either way.
That's fine. Mhm.
Okay, that's fine. Okay.
Okay, and, yeah, well, that's right.
All right, thank you. All right, next item, community relations, FOIA report. Anything to add on top of that? Okay. Superintendent's report?
What do I have? It's August. Okay, we were thinking it was February. Sorry, that was an inside joke with Mr. Zier. It's not February, it's August, which means that the school year is almost ready to begin. So I think things are in really good shape for school. You know, as the board knows, as we've talked about, we've had a lot of hiring going on, and I believe Mr. Zier's count is 81 new total staff members this year. So that's a lot of people, and I think his department's been very, very busy processing people, but processing them very quickly because, as I mentioned to the board, speed is really important at this time of year because it's a competitive job market, and we do not want to lose good people just because we couldn't process them quick enough. So I don't think we've lost anybody because of that. I think we've been very good at that. The schools are starting to really buzz with material pickup at the high school, open houses that'll be happening in our elementary schools soon, and our new teachers start tomorrow. So all of our new staff will start tomorrow. They spend the morning here. We have an orientation. We take them on the now infamous bus tour of the district. So they really get a good overview and understand the community, because I think that's really important that the people that are teaching our kids and working with our kids understand the community from which our kids are coming from. So that's always a really fun day tomorrow. On Monday, we have all staff coming back. One thing that's different this year is we are not actually gathering all staff in the PAC on Monday. We're actually doing that later in the year at our mid-year institute, and the primary reason for that is we really had a speaker we wanted to bring in, and it was not possible to get him in August because every school district wants people at opening day institute. So it's actually George Corus, who's a big speaker on topics tied to personalized learning. So he's going to be coming in the middle of the year. So it'll be building-led activities on Monday, but much the same excitement. One of the things that we will be doing that we wish we didn't have to do, but it's a reality, and we always want to be prepared, is we will be doing safety drills in all of our buildings that Mr. Dean, our Chief Security Officer, has put together, and we'll be executing those drills because it's obviously very important for us to be prepared for eventualities we hope never happen, but if they do, we need to be prepared. So in addition to other activities on Monday, all of our staff will be going through that as well. I would also tell you, just a plug, the new year's starting when Huntley 158 today starts its season. And season 2 started today, was released today, and yes, our very own Mr. Iddings was one of our he just came to sign autographs.
Is season 1 on Netflix yet?
Season 1 is now on Netflix. Yes,
I binge watched season 1.
Yes.
Julie did.
Yes. Actually, we're just hoping there's none of that like ransomware where they get our episodes ahead of time and want us to have to.
Yeah, because I heard what happens on Game of Thrones this weekend.
So
it's
yes,
pretty good. It's pretty
yes,
good.
because there are some episodes in the can. If you're watching today's, you'll notice my hair is a lot longer than it is right now. And actually, you're coming up in either next week or the
Next
week
week or the
after.
week
Yeah.
after,
So
yeah.
we have a few in the can as we go into this season. But we're actively planning for new shows of that to go. So it's all the excitement of school, all the summer projects are winding down, and Doug and just as HR has been very busy over the summer. Doug and his department is at their busiest over the summer, and he of course has kept you updated at meetings as to the things going on. But I think the schools just look great. The things like the parking lot here, and I think looks great. I think we're well on our way to getting Mrs. Massajuski air conditioning. So that's great. It's all.
Let's get her a better shoulder
It's
first.
it's all there. And yep, she'll be back Monday. So all the summer stuff's wrapping up. So it's exciting always exciting to see a new year start, and that's one really nice thing about education. There's beginning and ends, and it's always exciting when a new year begins.
Very cool. All right, President's report. I notice weird street signs from time to time. There's still one in Huntley that's really bugs me, but the trustees don't want to do anything about it. It doesn't matter, but Halligus now goes through all the way to Kreutzer and all the way up to, 176, basically. Yet there's a sign that says it's not a through street. So one of those weird things. So if anybody from Huntley is watching this, actually the camera's over there, not over there.
Would you like that in the minutes?
Yeah, so, yeah, you can put it in the minutes if you want. But I did notice when I was driving in, the old sign is there pointing that the administrative building is this way, and it would have you turn into like the transportation area. Now that we've got those two new entrances, probably want to update the sign.
It's all on order. Yeah, no, we have new signage, just not here yet. So no, it's all it's gonna clearly show so people turn in the right place.
The other thing I noticed is that we have a solar eclipse happening on Monday. So with the teachers being here, I'm just interested in how environmentally the district will be to handle having staff on hand in basically a night situation. So are there any lighting concerns or anything of that nature? Good. And then,
Bon and Tyler is invited, though.
yes, or at least someone who sings with a raspy voice. Yes.
There's actually a whole playlist of Eclipse songs I've seen floating around the internet. There's some
Really?
good stuff. Yeah.
Okay, well,
Blister in the Sun.
oh, that's a good one, yeah. All right, yeah, in fact, you might want to have those playing to pump up the teachers. Yeah. So anyway, and then the final thing I wanted to bring up was just an opportunity for discussion on the Senate Bill 1 and where we stand on that. And obviously, the Senate passed it, but the House is still playing games with it, correct? If I understand that right, and they're not scheduled to be entertaining that for yet another week.
Yeah, I'm going to start, and probably Miss Melendi could fill in a lot of the details since she's down there. She's like our man on the street. So,
The Annabella Val, so to
Yeah,
speak,
yeah.
of our school board.
God is my witness, I thought turkeys could fly.
Yes.
So, so what happens is that the House needs to either, or override the veto, but instead what they did was they produced a bill that is exactly like the governor's mandatory veto revisions, and they put it to a vote, and of course it didn't pass. And now, so we're sitting here, and the House has adjourned. We got this big thing that's happening. The House is adjourned until August 23rd. So they have, I think, until August 29th to take action on this. If they take no action, there's no funding bill. Am I saying this all right? No, you guys are nodding, so I'm assuming that's correct. So we'll see what happens, but we may not know until the last week of August.
Well, one of the questions I had was it gamesmanship to vote on that mirrored bill, or was it a way of legally polling the legislature?
It was testing, yes. It was a way
Yeah.
show that that bill would not pass.
Okay.
That that bill would not pass.
Because polling is against the rules, but if you throw a fake bill out there and vote on it as if it's a real bill, you can get past it. Yeah, okay.
It's a legislative option.
A legislative option, okay, all right.
Alternate tactic.
Yeah.
But that vote, I don't know if it's a very good poll, because there was 0 yes votes, 60 no votes, 33 present votes, and 25 House members not voting at all.
Yeah, so you could say it wasn't definitive in that
Yeah.
the ones that didn't vote, if they, changed their vote to yes,
Yeah.
it would throw them off, right?
But that's, I mean, if you
Still
took,
wouldn't have passed.
yeah,
Even if they voted
Right.
yes.
it would have been 60 to 58, but that's pretty close if that's the poll you're looking for. This is not the poll you're looking for. Okay, I'm done with movie references.
No, you're not.
Yeah.
All right, so that's all I had for the president's report, unless anybody wants to slip in any other updates?
I'm sorry, I just had one, I didn't get during mine, but it was a late-breaking text I got from Mrs. Melendi. It says, "Tell Leslie she did not win the iPad from the mixer." I'm sorry.
Darn it.
So,
All right.
Didn't win?
didn't win, I'm sorry.
Don't go to those anymore.
Mr. Giselle.
All right.
Mr. Giselle, if I could interject real quick over here.
Yes.
Just want to make a note here. The personnel link is not down on the consent items. I just want to make sure this gets voted on. It ended up under the updates on the online version.
Oh, okay.
The agenda item is where it should be, it's just
Yeah.
the attachment.
Yes.
Right.
We'll move it, we'll move
Right.
the attachment, but the agenda's okay, just.
Perfect.
We'll move the attachment down there.
Yeah, no, thank you for highlighting that. Okay, so we go on to consent agenda. I'll, as we discussed, we'll move 15.2.1, just to discuss that. Is there anything else to remove? Then I'll make a motion to approve consent agenda with the removal of item number 15.2.1.
Second.
We have a motion and a second from Mr. Troy. Can I have roll call, please? Actually,
Strategic plan measures.
yeah, that's 15.2.1. We were- Yeah, can I have roll call, please?
Mrs. Melendi?
Yes.
Mr. Gentry?
Yes.
Mr. Giselle?
Yes.
Mr. Guerin?
Yes.
Mr. Troy?
Yes.
Mr. Fleck?
Yes.
Mr. Quagliano?
All right, motion carries, consent carries, and that takes us to item 15.2.1. I'll make a motion to approve the 2017-18 strategic planning measures with that one change in goal number 1.
Second.
We have a motion and a second from Mr. Fleck. Discussion.
Yeah, I did have a question for Erica. Perfect. I'm really glad you put that together the way it was. The data that I was looking at, what I was a little curious about is, first grade at the start, we are basically at the national average, and then we leapfrog considerably by the end. So I'm curious, why are we so close at the start? I mean, why I don't understand why we wouldn't be further along. So we got all day kindergarten. Why wouldn't we be above the national average a little bit, so that leap wouldn't have to be, say, as great, or could have the same leap but even be further along? Would be my question.
Yeah, so I think actually a couple of things. This is the statistical part of this data. So the Ames Web data that we're using, we've actually only been giving Ames Web to all students for 3 years. So last year was our third year doing it. In the meantime, they actually changed the test. So last year was the first year of the online version of the test, which really resulted in some different results. So there's not a specific reason I can give you for that, except that the data results fluctuated significantly for all districts. It's not public data, so I can't see it online,
Right.
but anybody I've asked. So that piece of it at the beginning of first grade, that's something I can't really explain, because to us, we saw it as a little bit of an anomaly when we jumped to the online version. The other thing about this test, and this is why we used the mean score, they have norms, but the norms change throughout the year, and it's a little bit complex because this data is designed to identify students for intervention purposes. And so that piece at the beginning of first grade, we'll know more when we test our first graders this year and compare to the national norm, and we'll see if that happens
Right,
again.
well-
Yeah.
Yes, but do you guys feel the same way? Wouldn't
No,
your
no,
expectation be that we would be a
The
little
way
bit
I
above
read
that?
it is, and a lot of these things, you see this with ACT and SAT as well, there's a normalization that goes on with it. And because some of these measurements are gearing towards early learners, such as first graders, the normalization is going to be tighter at the beginning
Okay.
than later on. So I think, we would probably distance ourselves after a year or so.
And I think that's
Which is
what
what
we'll
it
see.
showed. I mean,
Right.
I was just curious going on.
Yeah,
I was
and I think-
surprised we were so close to the average at the start, that's all.
I wouldn't be surprised if this year's data showed something somewhat similar. The other piece of it is just developmentally, the way that children acquire language is through kindergarten. You see it, but you're also developing a lot of other things in kindergarten as well. First grade is really where you see that take off. So to me, the fact why we really wanted to start it in first grade is to start that at the beginning of first grade and to see that flight up as we saw exceeding by so much. To me, that's the real important data. We'll certainly be happy to share it this coming year when we get the data for the fall, just to see.
Tony, can I jump in
Yeah.
and just say, one of the things, because kids are so developmentally at different age, different ranges at that early age, where we should see all the fruits of the labor of all those things like all-day kindergarten, all of the curricular things that we're putting into place is really after age 9. So like when you're in third grade, we really should see that, because some of those other things should balance out, and developmentally they are not all at the exact same level, but that's where we really should see a big difference, where we're jumping, against that national average.
And just a question on that national mean, how, I don't know the right term for it, but how well participated is that? Is that the full country? Does everyone look at it, or is it a growing set, a shrinking set of schools?
It's a growing set of schools. So Ames Web, I'd say over the past 7 to 8 years, has become really the premier benchmark tool that's used by districts in the country. Now, we have to pay for it. So that's a caveat that I'm certain some districts maybe don't choose to do that. But really, ever since the RTI mandate came into being, that's when Ames Web really became that tool, because schools need to be able to have a way to benchmark fall, winter, spring for those elementary students. I don't know of a school that doesn't use it. Let's put it that way. I'm sure there are some, but it's a very, very large national sample. Not a mandatory test, so it's not like, SAT when we're
Right,
comparing
right.
to everybody. But I feel like for this one, that national mean is a really good comparison.
Yeah, I was just curious if from year to year, you might see
That's
a shifting baseline if it was growing too
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, we might. And I think, typically as test participation increases, the score means tend to go down. Like if you recall, back when ACT wasn't given to everybody, the average scores were a lot higher. Once everybody started taking it, the average scores across the state were lower. But it's a pretty stable number. And like I said, I couldn't right now off the top of my head think of any school district, much less our comparison districts, that don't use it.
Okay.
So it's a pretty large sample.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
All right, since it is strategic plan, if we could have roll call? I'm assuming there's no other questions.
Mr. Gentry?
Yes.
Mr. Garin,
Yes.
Mr. Troy?
Yes.
Mr. Quagliano?
Yes.
Mrs. Melende?
Yes.
Mr. Drizel?
Yes.
Mr. Fleck?
Yes.
All right, motion carries. That takes us on to item number 17.1, payables. I'll make a motion to approve the purchase orders, impressed checks, and disbursements as noted.
Second.
We have a motion and a second from Mr. Quagliano. Any discussion? Questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Quagliano? Mr. Fleck?
Yes.
Mrs. Melende?
Yes.
Mr. Garin,
Yes.
Mr. Gentry?
Yes.
Mr. Troy?
Yes.
Mr. Drizel?
Yes. All right, motion carries. Item 17.2, I'll make a motion to approve the supplemental purchase orders report and supplemental accounts payable report as provided.
Second.
Motion and a second from Mr. Fleck. Any questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Garin,
Yes.
Mr. Giselle,
Yes.
Mr. Quagliano,
Yes.
Mr. Fleck,
Yes.
Mr. Troy,
Yes.
Mr. Gentry,
Yes.
Mrs. Melendi.
Yes.
Motion carries. Another chance for public comment? All right, with that, I'll make a motion to adjourn at 7:25 PM.
Second.
Motion and a second from Mr. Troy. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? All right, we are adjourned. Wow.